Democratic nomination debate hosted by CNN. Our candidates tonight, Frank Underwood, Jackie Sharp, and Heather Dunbar. I'm John King, and I'll be your moderator tonight. Our debate will be divided in two parts. The first part, focusing on foreign policy. Part two, focusing on the domestic agenda. And our format will be as follows. I will ask one candidate a question. That candidate will have 1 minute to answer. After that, all of our candidates can engage in an open conversation lasting for 5 minutes. We begin, though, with opening statements, and by lottery, it was decided that President Underwood goes first. Mr. President.
Thank you, and good evening, John. Good evening to my fellow candidates and to the good people of Sioux City. This nomination comes down to one word: vision. I believe that I have shown a clear vision to this country with America Works, the most comprehensive jobs program in nearly a century. We showed it could work in Washington, D.C. We need now to take what we did there and spread it nationwide so that the American dream can become the American reality. But that vision isn't enough on its own. You need someone with experience to make it happen. And between my time in Congress and now at the White House, I have more experience than both of my opponents combined. And when you hire someone for a job, are you going to hire someone with 30 years experience, or someone with less than 10, or someone with no experience at all? Where I come from down south, we call that as clear as a glass of moonshine.
Former Solicitor General Dunbar is next. Your opening statement, please.
Thank you, John. And thank you, Iowa. Well, I agree with the president. Vision and experience are exactly what America needs. Unfortunately, he has the wrong vision and horrendous experience. You can call America Works visionary, but in truth, it is just an ultra-conservative agenda that's been around for decades. Dismantle the safety net and hang people out to dry. As for the president's experience, he was in the leadership during one of the most ineffective decades in congressional history. As president, he has failed at everything he's done. America Works was illegal in the minds of many legal experts, myself included. His Jordan Valley plan was a disaster. If that's what you call experience, you're not just padding the resume, you are fabricating it. President Underwood isn't presenting us with a vision. He is convincing himself of his own delusion. Now, my vision is to tackle corporate greed, raise pay for those who need it most, and create jobs by growing the economy, not robbing people of their retirement and health care. My experience is 20 years defending the Constitution. You know, when I take my presidential oath, I will mean every word of it.
Ms. Dunbar, thank you. Congressman Sharp, your opening statement, please.
Thank you. As many of you know, I am a U.S. Army veteran. Now, I've seen firsthand the great sacrifices my fellow servicemen and women have made defending this country. But how can we ask them to protect a system that isn't protecting us? Take women, for example. There are 2 women at this debate running for president. That's extraordinary. But out in the general workforce, women earn 77 cents on the dollar compared to men. Even worse is minority women earning 67 cents on the dollar. Now, Ms. Dunbar can talk about balancing the scales, but she inherited a multi-billion-dollar fortune and never had to earn any cents on the dollar. Now, I don't agree with everything that President Underwood has done or proposes, but at least he knows what it means to work for a living. I can give you even better than that. I know what it means to fight for a living, and I will fight for fairness here at home just as fiercely as I fought our enemies overseas. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Now let's move to Part 1, foreign policy. And the first question is for you, Mr. President. Given the recent volatile events in the Jordan Valley, do you still believe it was correct to assemble the United Nations coalition and to intervene, or is it time now to call that intervention a mistake?
Well, I will answer that question, John, but I'd like to address first something Ms. Dunbar said a few moments ago. America Works is not some stale, old, conservative agenda. You name me one Republican who has suggested using federal funds to guarantee jobs for every American who wants one, and I will eat my hat. This isn't about dismantling government. It is about using the funds...
Aren't we supposed to be talking about foreign policy?
Yeah, I will. But first, I'd like to correct what you said.
Because it's easier to talk about America Works than to defend your indefensible UN mission.
Well, at least I have a record to defend, Ms. Dunbar.
Speaking of your record, Mr. President, you went on record saying you wouldn't run for president.
Well,
and yet,
John,
here you are.
It seems that your very thoughtful rules have gone out the window.
You have no respect for rules, Mr. President. Take FEMA, for example.
Oh, you want to talk about FEMA now instead of foreign policy?
I am just following your lead, sir. See what a mess we get into when we follow your brand of leadership?
Well, I must admit that Ms. Dunbar does have many years of experience making rhetorical arguments in court. And you've just seen proof of that today. But serving the American people is not about what you say, it's about what you do. And I would ask, what have you ever done?
I have to agree that Ms. Dunbar's lack of experience is a concern.
I find it ironic that the president talks about the importance of experience, given the fact that he appointed his wife UN ambassador despite her utter lack of credentials.
That's a sexist comment.
Excuse me?
You wouldn't be making that argument if a female president had appointed her husband.
A husband with the same lack of international affairs experience as Claire Underwood? Yes, I would.
In fact, it makes me question your advocacy for women in general.
Well, that's ridiculous.
What have you done to further gender equality? What have you done to balance the scales? That's your slogan, and yet you've left half of the population out of the mix.
But that is simply not true.
Can you name one specific thing?
Yes, I can. Being a woman who has served as Solicitor General, one of the few in the history of the court.
Well, that advanced your interests. But what did that do for 150 million women out there?
The very fact that a woman can hold that position...
So you are a symbol.
In a way, yes, I suppose I am. Me and many other women, including yourself.
Okay, but how does that get us from 77 cents on the dollar to 100? Real cents, well, not symbolic
Now
cents.
You're just aping the president's rhetoric.
Another sexist comment.
How could you possibly misconstrue my words?
For myself. I am not aping the president or any other man.
I'm sorry, I won't engage with this.
You know, when things get tough on the battlefield, we never say, sorry, I won't engage. We engage, Miss Dunbar. And you need to confront the fact that you do not have women's best interests at heart.
John, this is getting out of hand.
All right, well, then let's move on to the next question. We are in the foreign policy portion of this debate. And Ms. Dunbar, let me bring this question to you. You're very critical of the president. You say it's indefensible, what he has done in the Jordan Valley. But
That's
specifically,
right.
What would you do differently?
Well, John, I'm glad you asked that. Sending troops into the Jordan Valley isn't what I call diplomacy. It's brings
Everybody,
look where it got us.
Mrs. Underwood needs to leave us now.
President Underwood.
I really wish I could stay, but I have a very full day. Tomorrow I should rest up. But again, I want to thank you all for your hospitality and all of your hard work. Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.
His trickle-down diplomacy is another example of delusion.
Mrs. Underwood.
Oh, you should go back inside with the volunteers and have the full campaign experience.
I didn't come to New Hampshire for that. I came to speak with you.
Tomorrow, maybe. My brain is a bit fried.
Is it what Sharp said? Why you don't want to watch anymore? The sexist comment?
Oh, I honestly don't care. It's all spectacle. Who can get the most points, right? Good night.
Now for part two of our debate, the domestic agenda. And the first question goes to you, Congresswoman. The president speaks of America Works. Ms. Dunbar wants to raise the minimum wage, talks about regulating executive pay. But a lot of people aren't quite clear about your economic policy. What specifically, I underscore specifically, would you do if elected president?
Well, I plan to do a lot. And we talked about this earlier. First and foremost, I want to press for gender equality and close the salary gap. If half of the working population has more money in their pockets, that will catalyze spending, which will grow the economy, which will in turn create more jobs.
Mr. President, what do you think of that?
Well, I agree. I think that gender equality is very important. And under my AmWorks program, there will be a provision that all AmWorks jobs, there can be no discrepancy in pay between men and women.
AmWorks jobs, so that's the government. What about the rest of the private sector?
Well, I think we have to start by leading by example. Then we introduce legislation.
Leading by
that broadens
example. If
the-
America Works
I'm
is
sorry,
how you
please
lead by
let me
example,
finish
if
my
that
point,
is how
Ms.
you
Dunbar.
lead by example, then are we to assume that everyone should illegally raid funds that they have no right to use? Everyone should start robbing banks, holding up liquor stores?
Now, Ms. Dunbar, with all due respect, you can criticize my programs as much as you want, but to accuse me of illegal activity...
One thing you can't deny is that I am much more of an authority on the Constitution than you are, Mr. President.
Ms. Dunbar, all three of us on this stage have taken oaths of office. I would have to say that we have all defended the Constitution. You don't have some special claim on the Constitution. The Constitution belongs to everyone in this room and every citizen in the United States. But I would ask Ms. Sharp, you voted in favor of dismantling America Works. Was that because you thought it was, in fact, as Ms. Dunbar says, illegal?
I voted for dismantlement because I wanted to make sure we were prepared for the hurricane, not because I thought your reading of the Stafford Act was illegal, per se.
Honestly, you think the president had a right to do what he did?
It's an appropriations issue, not a legal one.
But what about his character? He basically walked into FEMA and said, stick 'em up and show me where the vault
Oh,
is.
so now I'm a bank robber. Six-gun Underwood, what they call me in South Carolina.
I'm sorry, but I do not find this funny. I say you are a hypocrite. You claim to care about the 10 million people out of work, but you will steal their disaster relief
Look, this
fund,
is an appropriations
Social
issue,
Security,
Ms. Dunbar.
and
We put
healthcare
50,000
to fund a
people to
program
work.
that causes
Heather
more damage
Dunbar
than
wants
good.
to balance the scales, to fix a broken system, and yet she sends her own kids to private school with money she never earned, but which she inherited. Now, it is easy to talk about the problems of the poor with a silver spoon in your mouth.
Am I well off? Absolutely. So was FDR when he developed the New Deal. Since when does one's income determine one's amount of empathy?
Would you send your kids to public school?
Let's keep our children out of this.
You want your kids to have a head start.
To have an advantage over the kids in public school.
Lots of Americans of all ranges of income choose to send their children to private or parochial schools.
But isn't it true that you want your children to have a leg up on everyone else?
Is that balancing the scales? Or is that hypocrisy? Or maybe it's that you didn't want to raise them yourself, so you sent them to boarding school.
Wow. You must really want to be president. I would never in a million years bring up your children in a debate. The way you choose to raise them is your business. Do I want the best for my kids? Yes, I do. I imagine you're the same way. I hope you are.
Well, I'm sure you're both excellent mothers, but perhaps we should get back to some of the issues
Congresswoman
at
Sharp
hand.
raised the issue of sexism earlier. Now, it is an important point, and we need to address it. Sexism is wrong. The Congresswoman is correct in saying that all aspects of it should be illegal. And then she accused me of being sexist for criticizing Claire Underwood. But wouldn't that same logic hold true for you, Ms. Sharp? Would you have come after my kids if I were a man? Aren't you trying to paint the picture that I'm a bad mother shipping my kids off to some far-flung place because you know if you can make me seem like a bad mother, then how could anyone possibly support me? That's not hardball. That is just disgusting.
Well, I have to say, I do think Ms. Dunbar has a point. I mean, speaking of hypocrisy, don't you send your own kids to private school, Congresswoman?
Well, that wasn't my point.
What was your point?
I was, my point... John, I think I've said all I need to say on this subject.
All right, fair enough, Congresswoman. Next question goes to you, Ms. Dunbar.